You know, in a world packed with high-tech video games and endless things to stream, you have to ask, how did a simple book of logic puzzles become this global sensation? We're talking about Murdle, of course. And today, we're going to crack the case of its absolutely wild success. So here's the plan. First, we'll take a look at the phenomenon itself. Then, we're going to get our hands dirty. I'll show you how to crack your very first case. After that, we'll dive into the trickier puzzles, explore the surprisingly deep lore of the Murdleverse, and see how this whole thing went global. And finally, we'll uncover what I think is the real secret to why everyone loves Murdle. All right, let's start at the very beginning. What makes Murdle such a puzzling phenomenon? I mean, why is a book full of logic grids flying off the shelves in this day and age? The answer is actually pretty cool. And look, it's a totally fair question. In an era where we want everything instantly, who's really going to sit down with a paperback full of what looks like, well, inscrutable diagrams? Turns out, millions and millions of people. And that very analog, old-school feel, that's a huge part of its charm. The whole premise is just brilliantly simple. You take on the role of Deductive Logico, this master detective. And your job is to solve 100 little mini-mysteries by figuring out that classic trio. Who did it? What did they do it with, and where did it happen?
So, how do you actually solve a Murdle? This is where the fun begins. Let's crack our first case together. We'll walk through an example right out of the book, and you'll see just how elegant these things are.
Okay, the heart and soul of every single Murdle puzzle is this, the deduction grid. The book calls it a powerful technology, which is kind of funny, but you know what? It's not wrong. It's this simple but amazing tool that lets you visualize all the clues and just systematically get rid of what's impossible until only the truth is left.
All right, here we go. Our first clue from the tutorial case. Whoever was in the stadium was right-handed. It seems pretty straightforward, right? But to make any sense of it, we need our list of suspects.
So what does this clue really tell us? Well, the book gives you these little suspect files, and they tell us that two of our suspects, Mayor Honey and Chancellor Tuscany, are both left-handed. So that only leaves one person who could possibly have been at the stadium.
That's right, it has to be Dean Glaucus. So we go to our grid and put a nice, satisfying checkmark where the Dean's row and the stadium column meet. And this is where the magic of the grid kicks in. Because if the Dean was at the stadium, he couldn't have been anywhere else, right? So we X out the rest of his row. And no one else was at the stadium, so we X out the rest of that column. See how that works?
Let's keep going. Clue number 2. The suspect with a graduation cord had beautiful hazel eyes. Okay, time to go back to our suspect files. A quick check of those files, and we see that only one person has hazel eyes, Mayor Honey. Boom! We now know she had the graduation cord, so we put a check mark there, and just like we did before, we fill the rest of her new row and column with X's. You can already see how, just clue by clue, the grid starts to fill itself in, pushing you right toward the final answer.
Okay, so just when you're feeling confident, just when you think you've got this whole thing figured out, Murdle throws a massive curveball. This brings us to the occult medium puzzles and the brilliant little twist that stumps so many people, the lying suspect.
So in these tougher puzzles, the clues come from the suspects themselves. But there's one single critical rule you have to remember. The murderer always, always lies. Everyone else tells the truth. The problem? You have no idea who the murderer is.
So how on earth do you solve a puzzle when you know one of the clues is a flat-out lie? Well, you do it through a super methodical process of elimination. You start by just assuming the first suspect is the liar. You mark the exact opposite of what they said in the grid, then you fill in the other clues as if they're true. Now, if the grid solves perfectly, awesome, you just found your killer. But if you hit a wall, a contradiction, like two people being in the same place at once, then you know your assumption was wrong. So you erase it all and start over, this time assuming the second suspect is the liar. It takes patience, but it's completely foolproof.
But here's the thing that really elevates Murdle. It's so much more than just a series of disconnected puzzles. There's a whole world being built here, which brings us to the Murdleverse.
The creator, G.T. Karber, said it best himself in a Reddit AMA. He said, "I hope that the book feels 1000x bigger than the daily puzzles," and he totally nailed it. He wanted to build a real narrative experience that ties all 100 of these mysteries together.
And you really feel that when you start noticing all the little details.
There are recurring characters, like the hilariously suspicious Mayor Honey. There are running gags, little Easter eggs for the dedicated fans. All of this stuff weaves together to create a bigger story, transforming a puzzle book into what everyone now lovingly calls the Murdleverse.
This ever-expanding world has created a very real-world community around it, which leads us to Section 5, a truly global investigation. Murdle has completely leaped off the page and become this huge social phenomenon.
I mean, just look at the journey this thing has been on. It's been absolutely meteoric. It started as a daily puzzle on a website, Murdle.com. That led to the best-selling book series we all know. Now there are live Murdle nights where people get together and compete in person, and get this, it was confirmed on Reddit that a TV show is now in the works. It's becoming a full-blown media franchise. And the fan community is just as awesome. You've got these super active groups on Reddit and Discord where people are dissecting every single clue. It's been a massive success story for independent bookstores. People are even hosting their own Murdle-themed dinner parties. And in this perfect mix of old and new school, you have fans scanning the physical pages so they can solve the puzzles on their tablets. It's amazing.
So, let's step back for a second. What is the real, deep appeal of Murdle? Why are so many of us drawn to these little paper and pen puzzles? That brings us to our final question. What's the real puzzle we're all trying to solve here?
When you really boil it all down, every Murdle puzzle is about one thing, and one thing only: finding the contradiction. You test a theory, you follow the logic, and you keep pushing until something breaks. And that moment, that aha, when you find the one piece that just doesn't fit, that's your breakthrough.
And this isn't just a game. This skill has some serious real-world applications. Check out this quote from a YouTuber who's also a hypnotherapist. He says he uses this exact skill, pulling apart statements to find a contradiction, to help his clients work through their anxiety. He calls it one of his secrets to being an effective therapist. How cool is that?
And really, that's the magic of Murdle, isn't it? The deep satisfaction doesn't just come from catching a fake killer on a piece of paper. It's about training your brain to think critically, to spot when things don't add up, and to find the signal in all the noise. It's a mental workout that makes you sharper in the real world. So, as you go about your day, it makes you wonder, what's the next puzzle you'll solve?